Now, Mr. Habas, to talk about Pakistan, it seems that Pakistan always gets short shrift, both in our policy and in our discussion when we address Afghanistan and Pakistan. I'm hoping you're going to be able to rebalance this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I'll try to do that. And I may remind, indeed, I am the last speaker of the last panel. I just thought that may help some of those who are tired. Let me begin with a very basic introduction of what is happening vis-a-vis Pakistan-US relations. And then I'll go with talking about 5 pillars of US-Pakistan policy relations. And then I'll talk about another 4 or 5 topics which I think are the way to refine the US-Pakistan relationship, adjust it, maybe discard some of the pillars of that policy. I'll begin by saying that very clearly, United States is still in search of a comprehensive and sustainable policy towards Pakistan. I think this was clear by some of the remarks made earlier as well. And the foundation, the very foundation of this, there's a disconnect. The foundation of this disconnect is mistrust. And I'll come to this word mistrust again by the end. But let us be very clear. What are the core US security interests or core US foreign policy interests in Pakistan? In my assessment, very clearly 3. Number 1, the whole issue of nuclear security. Number 2, this whole notion of militancy in the tribal areas in Pakistan and the Pakistani militant groups going from Pakistani federally administered tribal areas into Afghanistan, hitting NATO, hitting US installments. The third component is an issue related to homeland security, especially since this whole unfortunate incident or episode of Faisal Shehzad, who tried to blow up Times Square. So these are the 3 major core foreign policy interests, or national security, I should say national security interests of US. Now let me come to those 5 pillars. How US wants to deal with Pakistan, how it is trying to deal with Pakistan. And while actually starting this point, I'm reminded of Dennis Cox, who has written the best book on US-Pakistan relations. So if you want to know the background, you have to read Dennis Cox's book. But let me talk about the prevailing current 5 pillars. Number 1, development aid. Kerry-Lugar-Berman bill provides or promises $7.5 billion in 5 years, $1.5 billion for development aid. It is not very clearly defined what do we mean by development aid in Pakistan, but at least we know that this is not military aid, which traditionally was the case. And this was in response to Pakistani critique, Pakistani consistent perennial criticism that US always supports Pakistani military dictators and US support for Pakistan is always for military aid. In response to that, this time a different approach was taken. The problem with that is, number 1, it took quite a while. This was decided about 3 years ago in principle. Actually, the credit goes to now Vice President Joe Biden, but it took a couple of years really for it to go through those congressional approvals and all those facilities that are needed in Pakistan. But nonetheless, development aid is the central pillar. There are problems in that regard. One of those were referred to by Stephen Biddle, I think, which when he was mentioning about contractors reform. Out of those $1.5 billion per year, which still actually has to start, except some of the amount that has gone to Pakistan for the first year, about, people believe, 300 million will go to different contractors and for different bureaucratic channels. So that is a good policy that still needs, we'll see how it is implemented. But we should remember, $1.5 billion for Pakistan per year means about 1 to 2% of its total GDP. So we are not talking about a huge amount in that sense, which will make any significant change in the socio-political economic fabric of the country. The second point, the second pillar of US policy towards Pakistan, engagement with Pakistan military. And that is evident from what Brian was referring to between 2002 to 2008, or actually before that, since Musharraf came into power, 2001 to 2008, $15 billion. When I go to different areas in Pakistan, in the tribal areas, especially in Northwest Frontier Province, which is now called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, you ask people there, what was really something new that was created in those 8-9 years? They cannot show you roads or hospitals or schools. So we really don't know where all that $15 billion went. Perhaps supporting Pakistan military in the tribal areas, enhancing its capacity. So that relationship continues, though in a different manner. Recently, $2 billion were committed just 2 or 3 weeks ago in a strategic dialogue with Pakistan, $2 billion for 5 years. But there are serious challenges. My argument is, even if you increase that $2 billion to $20 billion, Pakistan military has a different way of looking at its interests in the region. Haqqani network in North Waziristan. That is an issue for United States, for even Afghans. For Pakistan, that means hedging the bets. Lashkar-e-Taiba. I fully agree, Pakistani military, especially General Musharraf, had clamped down on so many of these terrorist groups. Not on Lashkar-e-Taiba. Even since Mumbai attacks in 2008, where there was a very clear linkage of Lashkar-e-Taiba, even despite that, some of their offices were closed, but that group remains operative, functional, active. One of the people, Mr. Lakhvi, who's considered as the brain behind the Mumbai attacks, or at least one of those, is in a Pakistani prison, but the legal case is not being pursued, and he apparently, according to Pakistani media reports, has his own cell phone, and he talks to his people. The point I'm making, engagement with military is good. It is vital for US interests, because Pakistan military is the most central, important, resourceful institution, but there is limit to convergence of interests, because Pakistan military has its own, from their point of view, legitimate interests. Unless we are ready to compromise from US perspective on those interests, no amount of engagement or aid to military will help. The third pillar of the US policy, which I'll now talk about, is support for democracy. We know that recently President Zardari perhaps was saved through US intervention. The military wanted him removed, not the removal of the whole democratic setup, but at least his removal was on cards. That was done. But we have to be clear that the real test will come if and when the Pakistan military will take over the country again. It is unlikely now. I hope that will not happen. But the test will also be when someone who's not very friendly towards the United States, maybe like Nawaz Sharif, maybe like Imran Khan or somebody else, will be in power. Whether still US will be able to say that one of our objectives in the region is to support Pakistani democracy, that will be the real test. And we have to be careful. In case of allies and friends also, US should not push its friends too much. The only one incident, a tragic one, which comes to my mind, is when the previous US administration pushed Musharraf and Benazir Bhutto to join hands. Musharraf was a sinking ship, and Benazir Bhutto was the leader of the comparatively most progressive political party in Pakistan. Just because of some interests in Washington, D.C., both were forced to join hands. Musharraf was going down anyways. Perhaps no one could see that in Washington, D.C. Benazir Bhutto went down with him. So if that is what is meant by support to democracy, that can be fatal. So we have to be careful in that regard. The fourth foreign policy pillar of US towards Pakistan is in fact one which is a laudable one, which is helping Pakistan in times of crisis. Two examples, 2005 earthquake and US support, not in billions, in millions. That made a lot of difference. Even now, that is referred to as something which changed public policy opinion in Pakistan towards US. Recently, the 2010 devastating floods, billions of dollars of loss, major crisis in Pakistan. US was among the first ones. Actually, US was the first country to help Pakistan, now providing $350 million, more than China, more than Saudi Arabia. So that is fourth pillar of this policy, which I think should stay there. Last pillar, which is the most controversial one, is the policy of drone attacks. And I want to spend a couple of minutes on that. This drone policy I'm referring to, these unmanned aircraft which go into federally administered tribal areas, and we hear there was an attack in North Waziristan or South Waziristan or Bajor, 10 people killed, 20 people killed, 10 terrorists killed. First question, whether these drone attacks, I believe that these drone attacks was a good tactic, but it has been converted into a strategy. So the question is whether these attacks, drone attacks, are actually damaging the networks of terrorists, are creating fear among those. The answer is yes. Second question, whether these drone attacks are popular in Pakistan? No. So can we deduce from these two that all Pakistanis probably like these terrorists because they don't like these attacks, and these attacks are actually damaging terrorists? We cannot deduce that Pakistanis don't like these drone attacks. The reason is, when there are more drone attacks, those terror networks react through Pakistan, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, inside Pakistan. There have been 95 suicide attacks in Pakistan in 2010 so far. 2009, there were 95 attacks. This year, 2010, there have been about 50 attacks or so. 2008, go 1 year before that, 69 attacks. 2008, 66 attacks. 2005, 6 attacks. The point I'm making, just look at the increase in the number of drones, and there are more suicide attacks all across Pakistan. Unprecedented things are happening. Attacks on the Sufi shrines in Pakistan, from Abdullah Shah Ghazi in Karachi, which is a very popular, well-known Sufi shrine, to one in Peshawar of Rahman Baba, to one in Lahore, one in another part of Punjab. There is a reaction from these militant groups. So how will we finally weigh that these drone attacks, which are killing terrorists, don't take me wrong, they are killing attacks, but by and large, there are also civilian casualties. So what is the net result? How will we weigh? There is no way to quantify it. There is no empirical evidence to actually prove what I'm saying. But what Mr. Paul Pillar was saying, it is very clear that we are creating more terrorists in the process. So in the long-term context, this, in my assessment, is a counterproductive policy. So these were the 5 major policy pillars, if I may call those, where we need adjustment. And I'll finish in about 3-4 minutes.